The European Union has never worked. The idea of the European Union was that if you put all of Europe together, it has a GDP that's comparable to ours. It has soldiers, an army comparable to ours if you put it all together. It has population comparable to ours. In other words, it shouldn't be a non-entity in the world the way it is, right? So because it's all small countries, they can't compete with the Russians, with China, with us. And the idea is you put it all together, then they can compete. That's the idea. The problem is, of course, that like America, there are a bunch of very different states. The Italians are not like the Germans. Italy is not like Germany. The British are not like either of them. The French are not like either. The Europeans have been making these jokes and fighting these wars for 2,000 years. It's not suddenly going to go away. So like in our country, you have a choice. Either you let people be themselves or you become a tyrant. And of course, we have the left, which wants to become a tyrant, wants a powerful central government to tell everybody what to do. Doesn't matter if you live in Arkansas. You have no right to be different than the people in L.A., right? It doesn't matter if you live in Indiana. You have to obey the rules that are set in Washington, D.C. That's how you get guys like Obama telling you who can use the bathrooms in your elementary school. The original idea of the country, e pluribus unum, out of many states, out of many colonies, we will be one United States of America. That's the idea that theoretically, the right is supposed to support. In Arkansas, do it the Arkansas way. In New York, do it the New York way and then live wherever you please, right? But the European Union can't get that right because of race. And the thing is it race? Racial thinking is so simplistic. Racial thinking is so simplistic. That's why I always love these pseudo-intellectual Nazis who come along and say, well, you know, the science of race and the science. It's crap. I mean, think about yourself for a minute. Are you your genes? Do your genes set your entire personality? Or does your history also set your personality? And given your history, given your genes, your actions, the choices you make. If you make a wrong choice and you go down a bad road, that's going to change your personality. You make good choices, go down a good road, you're going to become a very different person. So history, genes, the things you do, the choices you make, those all work together, and you can't ever pick any of them apart in your own life, in anybody's life. We all think that our good traits are inborn and our bad traits are our parents' fault. The same thing with race. We think that our good traits, the good traits of each race and the talents of each race are inherent, and the bad traits must be because of culture. But they're all blended together, and that's what's so ridiculous about it. And the thing is, what is racism? This is the question that nobody ever asks, but I think it's really important. Racism, to me, is assigning moral quality to races. And I do not believe that's possible. I have never seen any, I'm not a geneticist, but I've never seen any genetic proof that that's possible. Again, it's hard to talk about genetics because I think a lot of geneticists are silenced on this issue, but it is also against my religion. And my religion is based on my observation of reality. I have never noticed one race being morally better than another. I have noticed in various times and places certain races become the criminal class because they are treated like the criminal class and they live into that treatment. I've seen that happen, but I have never believed and never seen that a race becomes criminal because of bloodlines. I just don't think that's scientific. I think it's simplistic nonsense. My religion says people are made in God's image, love your neighbor, and that's part of loving God. It seems to me that is the only true solution, that you treat each person as he comes, you treat each person as a child of God. That just seems to me good. It seems good thinking to me. It really does. But it's also my religion. I also believe it is what God wants from me. All right. So when you say to somebody, oh, we're going to let anybody into your country, doesn't matter what he thinks, doesn't matter what he believes, you create a situation that if you are a simplistic thinker, like some of the thinkers on the left, you can say, well, it's just about race. He just doesn't like that guy because he's brown. But is that why? Now, I've said this before, but I think it's important to say again. In Europe, the situation is very different. European countries were formed along racial lines. Germany was for the Germans, England was for the Angles and the Saxons, France was for the Franks, you know, just like China was for the Chinese. Most countries, all countries except for ours, are cast on racial grounds. There is an argument that a person who wants to defend his country in Europe can defend the racial quality of that country. He can say, yes, we can let some people in, but we can't let so many people in that our race gets overrun. You know, that's not the way I would live. I'm glad I'm an American who doesn't have to think like that, but it makes sense for people in Europe to think like that, and we shouldn't belittle them because they do. So to me, I mean, the thing is that when you bring in people to America, we have a right to say they should follow our philosophy. Our philosophy is easy. It's written down. All men are created equal. They have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government is supposed to be small. The Constitution is supposed to describe what it can do. Anything it says it doesn't say it can do, it can't do. That's supposed to be the American way. Everybody who comes in should have to be able to subscribe to that philosophy. We have the right to say that. You do not get a right to open our borders to anybody. And I don't care if he's brown. I don't care what color an American is, as long as he's an American. In Europe, it's a more difficult question. In Europe, it is a difficult question. Their history is so long. It is so intertangled with their race and with their culture. It is very difficult to tell whether or not they should be able to defend their racial makeup. As Americans, I find it really off-putting that they can make that argument, but a rational argument is a rational argument, and they can make it. My point is this. What we're really arguing about here is never really race. It's always really power. And that is why I'm so suspicious of any cry of racism against people. I think you can work out the arguments, think the arguments. I think all racial thinking is simplistic and stupid. I really do. But it doesn't mean it's not an element in what you're trying to say. Vox magazine ran an article, for those of you who watched Game of Thrones, and you saw how Daenerys, the Dragon Queen, went nuts and destroyed the city because she had become intoxicated by her power and by her idea of her own decency. Matt Iglesias, a left-wing writer at Vox, wrote an article called Daenerys Was Right, King's Landing Had to Burn. And his point is basically they were opposed to having a strong central government, so she had to show them who was boss and burn them to the ground. That's the left. That is the left. When I said the left is the Dragon Queen, he proved it. Matt Iglesias proved it right there. The left is the Dragon Queen. It is all about central government. What you are seeing is an uprising against a strong central government. The Europeans want a federal government the way we have a federal government, if they're going to be a unity at all. If they're not, they want separation. That's what the British want. The British have always been separated from the continent. They've always been different from the continent. The idea of race is, what I'm saying is that the idea of race is a distraction. The idea of race is a distraction. There are issues about race that we should be allowed to discuss courageously, bluntly, any way we want. The accusation of racism should be barred from conversation unless the guy is actually hateful, unless he is actually screaming hate-filled words. The accusation of racism should be barred. We should be able to discuss culture, behavior, philosophy, and if all those things are attached to a single race, as for instance, we might say they are in Italy, we might say they are in Britain. If they are, then we have a right to discuss that as well. We should not be silenced because what we are fighting for is individual freedom against a strong central government.